Santa Claus isn't real. Most of us hear these crushing words at one time or another in our childhood. Usually when our parents or guardians deem us old enough to face the, quote, real world for what it really is. When they decide we've outgrown such fanciful notions. The idea of this magical man traveling on a flying sleigh on Christmas Eve to all the little good boys and girls, and gifting them whatever their hearts desire, is, for so many children, the last magical part of their childhood to be thoroughly snuffed out, often leaving in its wake a dreary, pedestrian, crushingly mundane Christmas that seems all the worse for Santa's absence. In a world that often seems cold, cruel, and uncaring, seeing children who still believe a magical man like Santa Claus exists, a man whose sole purpose is to bring joy to those who deserve it, is quite a joyous sight to behold, even for an old soul like me. This is why it always brings me such joy to watch these little children visiting the fake mall Santas, revealing to these men in red suits their deepest, innermost desires. It speaks to their belief not just in Santa Claus himself, but to a belief in goodness in the world, in kindness, in generosity, and a little bit of magic, too. Perhaps Santa Claus isn't just a story told to children. Perhaps the stories are a manifestation of something very, very real. But Santa Claus, Kris Kringle, or whatever name you choose to call him, can only bring magic into a child's life if they believe that he exists. For the poor child who's robbed of this magical Christmas savior, old Saint Nick loses his power for them once belief in him wanes. As I stand unnoticed in the crowd, I watch as the young girl, whose name is Sally, looks admiringly up at this fake Santa Claus with a glimmer of magic and of hope in her eyes. She still believes, and I believe in her. This little girl has no way of knowing that the man she speaks to is not the genuine article, and furthermore, she has no idea her Santa Claus, the real Santa Claus, the one she's been told tales about, really does exist. Perhaps not in the way she's imagined him, but he is real just the same, and is listening carefully to exactly what she asks for this Christmas. I know all about her, know all about the challenges she faces. I am keenly aware of the trials and tribulations this uncaring world has already placed on her path, even if she is not fully aware of them herself. This is why it breaks my heart as I stand unnoticed watching her speak to this pretend Santa, hearing her whispered wish of what she would like for Christmas. Poor little Sally only wants one thing for Christmas this year: for her grandfather to be home with her on Christmas Day. The mall Santa listens dutifully and responds to little Sally's request the way he must to so many that visit him in his chair, giving her vague reassurances that Santa Claus will do his best, while being careful to actually promise her nothing. But I know just how important this Christmas wish is for little Sally. For I know what this mall Santa, this pale imitation of the genuine article, does not. I know everything about her. She wants her grandfather to be home on Christmas Day, because her grandfather is the only family she has left. I know of her father, Christopher, named after his father, who was lost in the war in Iraq, and of her mother, who struggled valiantly to do the best she could to take care of her daughter on her own. However, in a world that is cold and indifferent to the needs of those who struggle, she did her best, but could not provide for little Sally in the way that she wanted to. Her job didn't pay enough to cover the rent in their modest one-bedroom apartment, much less food, toys, and the other things a young child needs. So she worked 2 jobs, having little choice but to leave Sally with a string of uncaring babysitters at first, and then, as she got older, at home all alone. I also know how Sally's mother was stricken with cancer, and how she simply could not afford the medical care she needed to keep her alive. Once her mother succumbed to her illness and passed away, leaving little Sally an orphan, she was taken in by her lonely old grandfather, the only family she had remaining. Her grandfather struggled as well. He had dedicated his entire life to working for a company that, just scant years before he was to retire, pulled some manner of chicanery that shouldn't be allowed in any civilized society. And the employee pension fund, and his retirement fund along with it, vanished into the wind and into the velvet-lined pockets of the wealthy executives at the top of the ladder. An unavoidable error, they'd said. Nothing to be done. So Sally's widowed grandfather retired from a lifetime of dedication to the company, with nothing to show for it but an aching body and an empty bank account. Still, little Sally's grandfather was committed to doing whatever he could to see to it that her childhood, despite all of its trials and tribulations, was a good one. So he went back to work, taking the only job he could find, a low-paying position in the unimaginably large warehouse that had been built on the outskirts of town, packaging boxes for one of the many companies owned by the impossibly rich billionaire who lived in his own private estate on the outskirts of town. It was grueling work, his every move being watched by robots and monitored by the collar all employees were mandated to wear. They required you to be on your feet, moving at all times, never pausing to catch your breath. Even using the restroom was penalized, all for a salary that a generation ago would have been so pitifully low as to be unthinkable. Her poor grandfather could barely keep up, but he pushed himself to the brink, as did his beleaguered co-workers, funneling the ungodly amounts of money made off the backs of their labor directly into the velvet-lined pockets of this celebrated billionaire, who already had more than he could hope to spend in 10 lifetimes, yet still inexplicably insisted on accumulating more and more, like a grotesque dragon sitting on its pile of ill-gotten gold. Grandpa made these sacrifices all in service of dear little Sally. But this year, Grandpa would be getting the help that this billionaire and seemingly most of society seemed so indifferent to providing. And he would be getting it from Santa Claus himself. I watch the little girl closely, can see her as she drives home with her grandfather, tight-lipped about the request she's given Santa, and brimming with joy in her unshakable belief that Santa will deliver her exactly what she's asked for. For most children, this would end in disappointment. Except this year, for her, it will be different. She has the real Santa Claus watching out for her this Christmas. I have heard her wish. I have seen and felt her pain. And though her request is an unusual one, not simply a desire for the latest toy or video game, I will make it come true for her. This little girl deserves some magic in her life, and this year I will show her that Santa Claus is indeed real, and he listens to the cries of poor, unfortunate children. Come Christmas morning this year, she will have exactly what she's asked me for. And so Christmas Eve came to pass, and once little Sally's grandfather tucked her away neatly into her bed, and sleep had overtaken her, Santa Claus went to work. First, to the warehouse where her grandfather slaved day in and day out to spread a bit of his Christmas warmth. And then, as only Santa could, he made his way directly to the estate of the billionaire owner who insisted Sally's grandfather leave his family and work on Christmas Day while he prepared for a lavish and comfortable Christmas at home with his own family. I entered the estate and the ostentatious home itself with ease. In fact, before I could even ascend to the roof to climb down the chimney, one of the children of the house saw me and, eyes bright with joy and excitement, opened the door to let me in. I could see this was a child who still believed in Santa Claus, who had yet to be faced with the cold, harsh realities of life outside of his father's perfect little estate. No surprise. With all of the wealth and influence his father hoarded, it would have likely been a long time before he would have to face those realities, had I not arrived. The exuberant joy that sparkled in his eyes when he saw me in my red suit was snuffed out just as quickly when he saw the axe in my hands. He remained that way, silenced and in shock, as I pushed past him and made my way toward the master bedroom. Once it was done, I was on my way, the young boy the only witness. But what could he say? His father had been murdered by Santa Claus himself. We all know that Santa Claus isn't real. At least, not for most of us. As I ditched the costume and jumped back in my car to head home, I could already see the orange glow on the horizon from the enormous warehouse fire now burning on the outskirts of town. My work was done. The warehouse was gone, and the greedy owner along with it. Me, and all the other workers would have our day off. And Sally and I could enjoy Santa's gift to us both, and finally have a very Merry Christmas.